Everyone at the party was smiling. I was paying. That's how it's always been. There were cheap plastic chairs lined up under string lights. Someone brought ribs that smelled better than they tasted. Aunts clutched warm, white wine in plastic cups. My cousin was showing off her new engagement ring to people who didn't ask. It looked like every other family party we'd ever had. Except for the folder on my lap. My name is Angela Moore. I'm 29. At work, I'm the senior operations lead for a fintech firm in Midtown Atlanta. I manage a team of 12. My inbox is clean. My calendar is colour-coded. People say I'm reliable, efficient, calm, under pressure. At home, I'm Leslie's older sister, the one who pays the bills, buys the groceries, covers for mistakes that aren't mine. When I got promoted, my mum said, "Just don't forget where you came from." When I paid off their mortgage, no one mentioned it at dinner. I'm respected everywhere except where it should have mattered most. My nails dug into the manila cardboard just enough to feel real. My hands had been shaking on the drive over, but they were steady now. It's strange how clarity shows up in silence, like a knock you finally decide to answer. "Angela," my mum called out. Her smile was bright, a little forced. She waved me over like I was late. I wasn't. I was just last. I took the seat furthest from the cake table. Not assigned, just assumed. I had sat there last year too. Leslie showed up late as expected, wearing a velvet jumpsuit and a Chanel clutch I had indirectly paid for. She smelled like department store perfume and entitlement. Everyone turned to greet her. Mum lit up. Dad stood up to hug her. I stayed seated. When the cake arrived, and after Dad's drunk little toast, Leslie raised her glass. "Let's all thank Angela for being our family ATM. Seriously, girl, you got us covered." They laughed, a loud, collective, unbothered laugh, like it was cute. Like I was some rich aunt from a sitcom. I didn't laugh. I placed the folder on the table. "This is the last withdrawal," I said. No one said anything. Kayla blinked twice. Mum stopped chewing. Leslie frowned like I'd interrupted her set. I stood, grabbed my coat, and walked out the side door. The cold air slapped me, but I didn't shiver. In the parking lot, I leaned against my car and opened the folder one last time. Inside were copies of bank transfers and notarized contract ownership documents. Proof that I had been silent and stupid and endlessly loyal. That folder was everything I had never said out loud. What they didn't know yet was that I owned 60% of Leslie's boutique, legally. And I was about to sell it to a stranger. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted peace. I was 14 when I started working weekends at Jimmy's, a sticky floored diner with fluorescent lighting that hummed louder than most of the customers. The manager called me Angie because he said Angela sounded too proper for someone scraping syrup off booth cushions. I nodded, wore the name tag, and kept my head down. Every Saturday night, I'd slide into the passenger seat of Mum's van apron, still on smelling like burnt bacon and hash browns. I'd hand her the cash folded tight in a rubber band. She never counted it in front of me, just took it, and said, "This helps more than you know," before pulling out of the parking lot. The next day, Leslie would have new Nike Air Max sneakers. Mum said it was for school, or confidence, or just because your sister deserves a little joy. That line stuck with me. She said it like Leslie's joy came in finite doses, and mine wasn't part of the ration. At home, I learned to take up less space. I did my homework at the kitchen counter with my elbows tucked in, while Leslie sprawled on the couch watching loud TV with her friends. When they laughed too hard and knocked over sodas, I wiped the floor before anyone asked. Once I found her uniform in a crumpled ball on the laundry room floor and ironed it without being told. She didn't say thanks. Dinner was leftovers as always. I'd eat over the sink, one hand holding the plate, the other scrolling through notes on my phone. The clatter of Leslie's friends in the living room felt like static. Sometimes I'd sit there long after I was done eating, just for the silence. I wrote in my diary, but I didn't call it that. It was a cheap spiral notebook I kept under my bed. The pages were filled with short lines, clipped like texts. The one I remember best was, "It's okay. Being useful is enough." That was the closest I ever came to asking for anything. When Leslie turned 15, she threw a pool party in our backyard. I wasn't invited, even though it was my house too. Mum told me to help set up snacks and refill the lemonade. Leslie rolled her eyes every time I stepped outside with a tray. "You don't have to act like a waitress," she said. But she didn't stop me either. Later that night, when they were all gone and the patio was sticky with spilled soda, Mum handed me a mop and said, "It's good practice. You'll run your own place someday." She said it like a compliment, but it landed like a job description I didn't apply for. At school, I was invisible unless someone needed help with homework or lunch money. Teachers called me steady. Friends, if you could call them, that said I was low drama, which usually meant forgettable. I never asked for rides, never threw sleepovers, never caused scenes. I was efficient, polite, and tired. There was a night in October, cold enough for jackets, but not quite winter, when Mum forgot to pick me up from work. I stood outside Jimmy's with my hoodie pulled over my head, counting my breath and my tips. I called Leslie. She didn't answer. I walked the 3 miles home in silence, every step sharper than the last. When I got back, Mum said I thought you'd find a way. That night, I wrote in the notebook, "Strong isn't the same as safe." Sometimes Kayla, our cousin, would study with me at the library. She'd sneak glances while I highlighted textbooks like it was a sport. One time she said, "You always look like you're somewhere else." I smiled. I didn't have the heart to tell her I was nowhere at all. By 15, I was working more than 12 hours a week. By 16, I was paying for my own textbooks, toiletries, and half the groceries. When I turned 17, I paid the late electricity bill. I remember Leslie telling her boyfriend, "My sister's just built for that stuff. She likes being the responsible one." I laughed in the bathroom alone that night, quietly enough not to be heard. On my 18th birthday, Mum gave me a card with no money inside. Just a line. "You're the rock of this family." I smiled, said thanks, and folded it into the notebook. That night, Leslie took the car to a party and came back drunk. I covered for her, said she had food poisoning. No one asked twice. I never asked for more. But sometimes I wondered what would happen if I stopped giving. I never asked for more. But sometimes I wondered what would happen if I stopped giving. I got into NYU, full scholarship, communications major, dorm included. It was my one ticket out. Out of the sticky kitchens, the quiet martyrdom, the background role I had mastered too well. I opened the acceptance letter in the bathroom at work, sitting on a closed toilet lid phone clutched in my hand like it might burst from joy. For 10 minutes, I imagined a different life, one with busy sidewalks, overstuffed subway cars and coffee shops where nobody knew me or expected anything from me. Then I walked out and served pancakes to strangers who called me sweetheart. I told Mom that night breathlessly. She blinked, nodded slowly, then said, "That's amazing, honey, but maybe not this year." "Why not this year?" I asked. Her eyes didn't meet mine. "Leslie's still trying to finish school. Without you helping out, we can't afford her tuition." "Just one more year, Angela." Dad chimed in like it was rehearsed. "You've always been the strong one. Don't give up now." Give up? I wasn't giving up. I was trying to start. I told Marcus everything. He was my boyfriend then, tall, soft-spoken, the kind of person who listens with both eyes. He'd helped me practice interview questions, told me I could do more than just survive. When I told him about the scholarship and my parents' plea, he didn't speak right away. He just sat there, frowning at the ground like the floor had betrayed him. "You know this isn't fair, right?" he finally said. I shrugged. "Fair doesn't matter. They need me. You need you," he said. But I didn't listen. I deferred NYU, signed up for online classes at the local community college, picked up a night shift at the grocery store and a weekend shift at the call centre. Marcus stayed for a while. He'd bring me snacks at work, leave notes on my dashboard. "Don't disappear." But one day he asked me to come meet his family for dinner and I said no, again, because Leslie had an exam and needed the car, because Mum had a migraine, because dinner burned and I was the only one who knew how to reset the fuse box. "I can't," I texted. "Family first." Marcus never replied. And that was that. Meanwhile, Leslie posted pictures of herself in rooftop bars and juice cafes, always captioned with something like "Shoo, boss babe," or "building my brand." She was studying fashion management, which mostly meant ordering clothes online and using my card. She told people she was self-made. I watched her stories late at night while sorting laundry and microwaving leftover pasta. One time, she tagged me, just my name, no thanks, no context. I guess I was the brand sponsor. I used to count how many hours I'd worked that week, how much I'd sent for her textbooks, her rent, her business course. It was always more than I expected. One month, I skipped a dentist appointment because I couldn't cover both our bills. When the tooth started to ache, I bit down harder and told myself it wasn't pain, just pressure. The night before her final exam, Leslie called in tears. "I need the quiet room pass and it's $60, and they won't let me take the test without it." I was already logging into Venmo before she finished the sentence. She didn't say, "Thank you." She said, "You're a lifesaver." I hung up and stared at the screen. Then I opened my calendar and deleted the reminder for my own final. I told my professor I had a family emergency. He believed me. They always did. That was the year I stopped dreaming out loud. NYU emails went unread. Marcus stopped showing up at the diner. My body moved through tasks like it was performing a well-rehearsed play. Smile, swipe card, load groceries, press mute on your own needs. At night, I'd sit in the car after shift and watch the fog cloud the windshield. I didn't cry. I just sat there waiting for the ache in my chest to settle into something dull and manageable. Eventually, it always did. No one noticed I didn't talk about New York anymore, not even Kayla. And when people asked what I was doing with my life, I'd say, helping the family, like it was a career. Helping the family, I said, like it was a career. And in a way, I'd become a full-time support system, quiet, reliable, invisible. So when Leslie's business dream started crumbling, it wasn't even a question. She came to me in tears, dramatic as ever, clutching a pink leather notebook and a half-empty cup of iced matcha. "Angela, they're going to shut me down," she said. "I just need a little help to stay afloat until the next quarter." She had opened a boutique in a renovated strip mall downtown. Cute signage, neon fitting room lights, overpriced crop tops. She talked about building a legacy, but couldn't balance her inventory sheet. Rent was overdue. Vendor checks were bouncing. Her voice trembled in the exact register she used to get out of high school detention. I told her I'd think about it, but I already knew what I'd do. I called Corey the next morning. Corey and I had met during my brief stint as a community college TA. She had since gone on to law school and now worked corporate compliance and contracts mostly. She was precise, efficient, allergic to drama. If you're going to give her that much money, Corey said you need a paper trail. A legal one. I'm not loaning it, I said. I want equity. Silent partner, no emotion. Corey raised an eyebrow through the phone. That's a first. We drafted the paperwork, $40,000 in exchange for 60% ownership. Not just as a technicality, real shares, real control. It was fair considering the risk. But still, I didn't tell anyone. Not Leslie, not Mom, not even Kayla. I wired the money. Leslie hugged me like I donated a kidney. You're the best, she said. Seriously, I swear I'll make this worth it. I smiled. No need. Just keep receipts. She never asked why I didn't make her sign anything, because she assumed I wouldn't. That's the thing about being the dependable one. People confuse your silence with permission. I kept the contract in a locked drawer under my bed. Corey sent me digital backups. I didn't check them often. Helping family shouldn't be a transaction, I told myself. But still, I wanted proof that I hadn't imagined it all. 2 years passed. Leslie's boutique managed to survive barely. She stopped mentioning the money, started referring to it as her store, her success, her hustle. I let her. The Instagram posts kept coming. Women in business, made it myself. I liked them out of habit. Then came my own spiral. I broke up with someone, not Marcus, but someone newer, softer, who made playlists for me and texted back within 5 minutes. His name was Evan. It didn't end because of him. It ended because I was too tired to hold up both ends of a conversation. One night after the breakup, I found myself short on rent, not drastically, just a couple thousand, enough to make things tight, enough to make me scared. I had never asked for help before, not directly, but this time I did. I called Mum. I told her I was going through a hard patch. I didn't mention the breakup, just the numbers. I just need $3,000, I said. Short term, I'll pay it back in 3 months. There was silence on the line. Then, sweetheart, if we helped you, what would that teach Leslie? I swallowed. That I'm not made of steel. She sighed. You've always been self-sufficient, Angela. Don't lose that now. I said, okay. I hung up. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was ridiculous. I had given Leslie 40 grand without a contract in her hand, and my own mother wouldn't float me 3,000. I opened the drawer that night, pulled out the contract, read it slowly line by line. My name, my ownership, my signature, Leslie's, Corey's legal seal. It was all still there. I ran my finger over the embossed corner like it was Braille. A reminder that I existed, that I wasn't just a ghost propping up other people's dreams. I didn't tell Leslie about that night. I didn't tell anyone. But something inside me shifted. Not loud, not immediate, just quietly rearranged, like furniture moved slightly in the dark. No one would notice. But I did. I didn't tell Leslie about that night. I didn't tell anyone. But something inside me shifted. Not loud, not immediate, just quietly rearranged, like furniture moved slightly in the dark. No one would notice. But I did. Leslie kept spending. Spa trips, brunches, branded packaging for her boutique, which still struggled to meet monthly sales. Her social media told a different story. She started a TikTok series, Boss Life Fridays, talked about margins and manifesting, wore new blazers, quoted Oprah. People in the comments called her inspiring. Family called her ambitious, bold, fearless. At Thanksgiving, she gave a toast, said, "This year, taught me I can do anything. Everyone clapped. I passed the mashed potatoes. Mum patted my arm and whispered, "We're so proud of you too, baby. You keep us steady." Steady. Like furniture, like background music, like a human white noise machine. The next week, at Sunday dinner, Leslie came an hour late. No one started eating without her. She breezed in laughing about traffic and waving around a new purse. "Got it on sale," she said, though I knew the price tag from her last Venmo request. Dad stood to pull out her chair. I served salad. Mum smiled and said, "Your sister has such a sense of style. Remember how creative she was with her dolls?" I remembered. I also remembered being the one who vacuumed up the doll hair she cut off. Leslie got a write-up in the local business magazine. The article said she built her store from scratch. I texted Kayla a screenshot. She replied, "Girl, you're the glue. They just never see it out loud." I stared at the message. I didn't know if it was comfort or confirmation. Either way, I didn't reply. That winter, I started having chest pains. Not sharp, just pressure. Like someone was pressing an elbow into my sternum and wouldn't move. At first, I thought it was stress. Or acid. I Googled too much. Cut out coffee. Switched to peppermint tea. One night after folding laundry, I sat on the floor and felt the walls ripple. Not literally, but my breath shortened. My hands tingled. My heart beat fast, then slow, then fast again. I thought, I might die. I didn't. I called in sick the next day. Told work it was a cold. Sat in bed and stared at the ceiling. Thought about calling Kayla. Then didn't. When Leslie posted a story that night about her self-care retreat, I turned off my phone, lit a candle I'd been saving, stared at it until it burned low. The pressure never fully left. But I learned to live around it, like walking with a pebble in your shoe. Eventually, your foot adjusts. No one asked if I was okay, and I didn't offer the truth, because in our family, truth had a price. A few days later, Kayla texted asking to grab coffee. I made an excuse about work. She replied, "You don't have to carry everything. Seriously." I stared at that one too, then deleted the thread. At Christmas, Leslie posted a selfie with a caption, "No one helped me but me." She tagged the boutique and added a glitter filter. Mum printed it out and taped it to the fridge. "She's come so far," she told me, "all by herself." I said nothing. The next week, I found myself unable to get out of bed. Not sad, just blank. I missed a deadline at work, lied about food poisoning. When I finally stood up, it was to order takeout and take the trash out in silence. I bought anti-anxiety meds over the counter, tucked them into the lining of my winter coat. No one would think to look there. That Friday night, I walked by the living room and saw Leslie live streaming her boutique's anniversary. She was popping a bottle of champagne. The caption read, "1 year of vision hustle and faith." I turned on the TV. Loud, just static, and I sat there, not crying, just breathing, just trying to believe I still mattered. That Friday night, I walked by the living room and saw Leslie live streaming her boutique's anniversary. She was popping a bottle of champagne. The caption read, "1 year of vision hustle and faith." I turned on the TV, loud, just static, and I sat there, not crying, just breathing, just trying to believe I still mattered. The phone rang at 12:43 a.m. I was still on the couch, in the dark, remote in hand volume still high. The screen was just snow. For a moment, I let it ring, hoping it would stop. Hoping it was a wrong number, but it didn't stop. I knew before I looked. "Leslie," I answered on the fourth ring. "Angela?" she practically sang. I could hear ice clinking in a glass laughter behind her. Hey, so I got an idea. It's going to blow your mind. I didn't say anything, just waited. So there's this spot, uptown. Empty storefront, used to be a bakery or something. Lots of foot traffic. It's perfect. I've been manifesting this, you know? And boom, here it is. Just need a little push. I close my eyes. How much is a little 50, 55 max? I mean, I could get a loan, but you know how banks are. Slow, complicated, you're faster. No, I didn't plan to say it. It just came out. One syllable, solid. She paused like maybe the call had glitched. Wait, what? No, I repeated. I'm not giving you more money. Silence stretched out. Then a small, incredulous laugh. Angela, come on. Are you serious? Dead. Serious. You've helped me before. What's the problem now? You got a raise, right? You're always fine. You don't even have kids or a mortgage. Exactly, I'm fine. And I'd like to stay that way. Her voice sharpened. Wow, you're really going to be petty about this. Petty. You're always playing the victim, like you're this silent martyr. You act like no one appreciates you, but honestly, you like it. You get off on being the quiet one with all the power. I stood up, walked toward the kitchen. Her voice followed me through the phone. You know what your problem is? You don't have vision. You've never had it. That's why you're stuck in that boring job, that boring life while I'm out here building something. With my money, I said quietly. Excuse me. Forget it. No, say it. What the hell does that mean? I didn't answer. I just hung up. My hand was shaking a little. Not from fear. Something else. Adrenaline, maybe. Or clarity. The kind that arrives uninvited in the middle of the night. I went to my bedroom and pulled out the old file box from under my bed. It was dusty corners bent from being shoved around so many times. I hadn't opened it in over a year. Inside were the documents, bank transfers, and notarized contract emails confirming the stake in the boutique. Back then, I'd told myself it didn't matter. That real help didn't need recognition. That family meant sacrifice. But that night, I looked at those papers like they were something else evidence of what I gave, of what was taken, of how much I'd been edited out of my own story. I laid them out on my desk, lined them up by date. Transfer 1, contract date, purchase order, digital receipt. I opened my laptop, created a folder, ownership Leslie Boutique. I started building a timeline labeling every event. There was something satisfying in it, like untangling a knot you'd been wearing around your neck for years. I remembered a time 3 years ago, post-breakup, when I asked Mum for a loan, just $3,000 to help me move. She said, "We're not a bank, Angela." And yet, I'd given Leslie more than 10 times that. Without question, without name, I emailed Corey, "Need you to look at some old contracts, just in case." I didn't explain. He wouldn't need me to. My fingers trembled slightly when I hit send, but it wasn't fear this time. It was something closer to freedom. Outside, the street was still. A streetlight buzzed near the corner. My neighbour's dog barked once and went quiet. The quiet felt earned. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. Not for saying no, not for protecting what was left of me. I didn't owe her another cent. I owed myself a boundary. I owed myself proof that being quiet wasn't the same as being invisible. And this time I was going to be seen. The folder felt heavier than it was. Just paper, but with weight I had carried too long. I brought it to the party like a weapon I wasn't sure I'd ever use. But now, sitting at the table, hearing Leslie's laugh echo after her ATM joke, I knew. This was the moment. I placed the folder on the table, not with anger, but with precision. Calm. practiced. I looked at my mother, then my father, then Leslie. "This is the last withdrawal," I said. No one spoke. The laughter had stopped, replaced by the quiet clink of someone setting down a fork. I opened the folder, pulled out the first set of documents, bank transfers. $10,000 here. $15,000 there. All to Leslie. All with my name. Then the notarized contract, the ownership agreement, my 60% stake in her boutique, her signature in ink. "You gave me that money," Leslie snapped. Her voice was sharp, defensive. "You offered. I never begged. I never asked for anything back," I said. "But let's stop pretending I don't exist." "You only did this to control me," she shouted. "You wanted leverage, power. You couldn't stand that I built something and you didn't. You built something with my money," I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It landed like truth tends to do, quiet, final. Kayla stood up. Not dramatic, just steady. She looked around the table, then directly at Leslie. I heard Aunt Marie say once, "Angela wouldn't survive without this family." Like she was a stray they took in. Her voice trembled but didn't break. "You've used her for years. All of you." Mum opened her mouth, then closed it. Dad looked down at his plate. No one moved. It was like someone had cracked the surface of a frozen lake. A silence with depth. I scanned their faces. Aunt Janet reached for her wine glass and missed. Uncle Theo kept chewing even though nothing was in his mouth. The clinking of forks earlier had stopped. Now it was just the faint hum of the fridge from the kitchen, loud in the quiet. I could smell the cinnamon from the untouched cake. "You think she did all this out of greed?" Kayla said. "Angela worked 3 jobs while Leslie posted brunch photos." Leslie laughed dryly. "Wow, so now you're her bodyguard?" Kayla shrugged. "No, I'm just done pretending this is okay." I saw a flicker of doubt in Mum's eyes. It passed quickly, replaced by the usual forced calm. "Let's not do this tonight," she said. "It's your father's birthday." "And every year it's paid for by her," Kayla said, pointing at me. Dad finally looked up. "Angela, we never asked you to." "No," I cut in. "You just expected it." And I delivered. Quietly, every time. Leslie pushed back from the table. "This is insane. You want a medal for being bitter?" She turned to Mum. "Say something." But Mum said nothing. And in that silence, I understood they couldn't defend it anymore. I gathered the documents back into the folder. I didn't need to say more. But I did. Just one last thing. No one saw me as human, just as a safety net. Kayla put a hand on my shoulder. I hadn't known I needed that. Just a touch. Just not being alone. The party didn't resume. There was no recovering from this scene. People shifted in their seats. Some looked at Leslie with something like doubt. Others stared at me like they were really seeing me for the first time. Later, as I stood by the driveway, Kayla joined me. We didn't say anything. She just passed me her phone, showing a text from her mum. "You shouldn't have embarrassed the family." She rolled her eyes. "Guess it runs in the blood." We laughed. Not because it was funny, because we were finally breathing. For once, it wasn't me holding it all together. The email came 2 days after the party. Subject line, legal notice. Sender, lesliebtqstyle.com. I read it 3 times before opening, then read it again. My own sister was suing me, claiming she'd signed our business agreement under emotional duress, that I'd manipulated her with my power and resources. It would have been laughable if it didn't sting so much. Corey answered my call on the first ring. "Angela, let's go to war," he said, half joking. He was calm, clinical. I wasn't. My hands were cold, my inbox colder. Within hours, Leslie had posted a teary TikTok, all soft lighting and mascara streaks. I trusted my sister. I let her handle everything. And now she's taking everything away. It had over 300,000 views by morning. I woke up to hate DMs, "You're a snake. You stole her dream." One said, "No wonder your family hates you." The thing about lies is they travel fast, especially when wrapped in tears. At work, people avoided eye contact. One intern unfollowed me on Instagram. Corey said, "We fight it clean. Facts over feelings." I sent him the documents, contracts, receipts, emails. But public opinion wasn't interested in facts. I turned off comments. Kayla texted, "She's turning it into a brand." I didn't reply. Instead, I started writing a statement for court. I wrote and rewrote until it felt more like truth than defense. I have loved this family. I have helped without asking for credit. But love isn't infinite, and neither is money. The night before the hearing, Corey called me at 11 p.m. "You won't believe what I found." He sent me a link, an old Instagram live buried in Leslie's archive. She was clinking glasses with friends holding a printed copy of our contract. "Cheers to my sis who made it happen, 60-40 baby." She laughed. The clip was 1 minute and 22 seconds. It was everything. We submitted it as evidence. It went viral the next day, this time from an account called Truth Sisters. The comments flipped overnight. One woman wrote, "I was the Angela in my family. Thank you for standing up." Another, "No more emotional blackmail." Love this. In court, Leslie looked smaller than I remembered. Her lawyer kept objecting, flailing against the facts. When Corey played the video, the room held its breath. Even the judge raised an eyebrow. "This contradicts your entire testimony," she said. Leslie didn't answer. The ruling was quick. The contract was valid. I retained 60%. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked if I planned to sell. "Yes," I said, but not to her. That night, I sat on my couch and scrolled through the reposts. Angela, the stoic sister. Angela, the quiet fighter. I closed my phone and let the silence sit. For once, it felt full, not empty. The next morning, a florist rang my bell. White lilies and a card. It wasn't signed. I threw them out. Not everything white is pure. The folder still sat on my kitchen table. Corey texted congrats. "You were right to prepare." I typed, "She underestimated me." Then I deleted it. I sent back a simple, "Thank you." It was enough. I looked at the old family photo on the wall. We were all smiling, but I could finally see it. My eyes were tired even then. The world believed me now. But more importantly, I did too. Later that evening, Kayla came over with Thai takeout and a bottle of rosé. We ate on the floor, old school like we used to when we were broke and dreaming. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "You..." She hesitated. "Mum's pissed. Said I embarrassed everyone by testifying." I shrugged. "They wanted me invisible. You made that impossible." Kayla toasted her wine. "Two inconvenient truths." I laughed finally. A full laugh. One that came from my ribs. The lawsuit didn't just end a chapter, it exposed a library of rot. And now I was finally ready to burn it down and rebuild something honest. The lawsuit didn't just end a chapter, it exposed a library of rot. And now I was finally ready to burn it down and rebuild something honest. But burning things has consequences. It was only a week after the court ruling that Kayla stopped answering my texts. No congrats. No, you okay, nothing. I figured she was just decompressing like me. Until I saw her repost her mum's Facebook status, "Some people forget who fed them before they could feed themselves." Kayla didn't comment. She didn't have to. It felt like a side I didn't know she'd polished silence. I called her twice, straight to voicemail. The third time she answered. "Hey," she said flatly. "I guess you've heard." I said, "Yeah. Didn't think you'd ghost me over truth." She sighed. "It's not that. My mum, she's been on me non-stop. Says I humiliated the family." "By standing up for me?" I asked. "By not staying quiet?" She said you made everything about money." I laughed. One of those short, dry ones. "Right, because all I ever wanted was to cash in on trauma." Silence again. Then Kayla added, "She's not entirely wrong. You were kind of brutal at the party." That stung more than I expected. Brutal is the only language they listen to. Or maybe you just liked having the upper hand for once. She snapped. We both froze. I said, "You think I did all that to show off?" "No," she said quietly. "I think you did it because you were drowning. And maybe I wasn't the lifeline you thought I'd be." I didn't reply. There wasn't anything left to say. That night I sat on the floor of my apartment sorting through old journals. One from when I was 16 had a line, "I wish someone would notice when I stopped speaking." The next morning Mum called. She didn't mention the trial, just asked if I could come over. "Just to talk," she said. I almost said no, but I went. The house looked smaller than I remembered. She made tea, herbal. I hated herbal. She started with small talk, how Leslie wasn't sleeping well, how Uncle Greg's back was acting up. I let her run out of breath. Then she looked at me. Really looked. "Can we stop fighting?" she asked. "We're not fighting," I said. "You're avoiding." "Angela," she said, tone rising. "We're still a family. You can't just cut everyone off because of a few bad moments." I leaned forward. It wasn't a few moments. It was years. It was silence every time I was hurt. It was applause every time I gave something up. Her face tightened. "We did what we thought was best." "You thought Leslie was best," I said. "You still do." She shook her head but didn't deny it. "You're twisting things. We needed help." "And I needed a mother," I replied. That hit. Her eyes watered, but she didn't cry. I stood to leave. She grabbed my hand. "Please," she said, "don't do this. Don't throw it all away." I pulled back gently. "I'm not throwing anything. I'm just finally picking myself." She opened her mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to apologize, but nothing came out. On the way out, I passed the old bookshelf in the hallway. My senior photo was still crooked like always. But next to it now was a new frame, Leslie holding a plaque that said, "Entrepreneur of the Year." I smiled. Not in bitterness, just in recognition that I'd never be the daughter they celebrated. And I was finally okay with that. The next day, I received an envelope from Kayla. Inside was a photo of us at age 10 holding lemonade cups in front of a cardboard stand. On the back she wrote, "We started with truth. Maybe we'll find it again." I didn't text her back. Not yet, but I kept the photo in my wallet. Some bridges you burn, some you just leave unlit. I didn't hear from Leslie for weeks. No calls, no veiled Instagram posts. Silence, like a final verdict. Meanwhile, Corey was reaching out daily courteous reminders, legal check-ins, status updates. I told him I didn't mind waiting. I needed to see it through. The offer came through a woman named Alana Brooks, whom I'd met via podcast networking. She was mid-30s, sharp eyes, calm voice, the kind that holds space for truth. When I first explained the history, the stakes and the toxicity under the business's name, she didn't blink. She just said, "If you're stepping back, I want to step forward. On your terms." That was all I needed to hear. Over the next month, I presented at 2 Zoom calls with her team. I shared spreadsheets, revenue cost transfers, ownership details. I explained the vision not to continue a boutique, but to build something sustainable, ethically rooted. She responded with questions about value alignment suppliers, staff retention. She asked about Leslie, to which I replied, I trust your partnership more than I trusted my own family. She paused, then nodded. The deal tightened in clean clauses, not emotional clauses. Signing day in Corey's office smelled like printer ink and stale coffee. Alana walked in. No fanfare, shook my hand and said, Thank you for not holding on to something that wasn't serving you or your sister. I felt an odd pang, but it wasn't regret. It was finality. Press announcements came through quietly. No big headlines, just a local blog post, boutique changes, hands, owner breaks, family ties. Leslie's lawyer sent a notice of intent to sue again, claiming betrayal and public humiliation. I didn't respond personally. Corey filed everything preemptively. Meanwhile, styled photos of Alana's sustainable designs began appearing under the boutique name, less sparkly, more thoughtful. Social media fell quiet. Leslie's account posted a black square with caption, Not all sisters are sisters. It garnered thousands of comments, some supportive, others venomous. You ruined everything. Hope it was worth it. I blocked her. The boutique's account vanished in a week. Staff let go, inventory donated, lease surrendered. One neighbour even called me to say the colourful awning had been replaced with a for rent sign. I watched it all from my car across the street. Felt clean, like wiping off someone else's perfume from my collar. 2 weeks after the boutique closed, I walked into the corner cafe, same one where Leslie had once said, You're too risk-averse, Angie. I sat at that chipped wooden table. The barista recognised me, smiled shyly and said, Still no sugar. I nodded. Outside, 2 high schoolers debated Taylor Swift songs. Inside, I opened my notebook, no journal, just notes, podcast topics, margin spreadsheets, a list of women who'd reached out after the lawsuit. I glanced at the page that read, Draft idea, break the ATM cycle course. A plan, not a promise. A receipt slid across a message scribbled on the back. My sister used to make me feel small. Your words freed me. Thanks. A regular customer handed it to me before leaving. I held it as though it was a lifeline. The light through the window softened the dust in the air. No flash, just presence. And I whispered again, Turns out, boundaries are a risk worth taking. Later that night, I got a voicemail from Dad. His voice cracked. I heard the boutique closed. I guess. I just hope you're okay. He hung up. No apologies. No family law. Just that. I saved the message. Let it sit next to Kayla's voicemail, which came hours later. I started therapy. I'm sorry I couldn't be braver sooner. Thanks for teaching me what was possible. I listened twice, then saved them both and switched off my phone. I spent the next few mornings sitting at that cafe sketching out podcast episodes, workshop ideas, workbook outlines, tangible tools for women stuck in invisible financial chains. I messaged Alana once, Let's partner on a scholarship for women in family bailouts. She replied instantly. I forwarded the plan to Corey. We can scale, he said. Finally, the Angela I know. On a Thursday, I bumped into one of the boutique's former employees in Whole Foods. She looked awkward but honest. Hey, everything okay with you? I nodded. She said, We're all shocked. But some of us texted a group chat today. She did the right thing. Just wanted you to know. I thanked her. Felt accountable, not guilty. The last time I walked past the boutique space, the windows were dark. A Felice sign drooped. I didn't stop. I'd done my job. not theirs, not anymore. That evening, I polished the final lines of my first blog post, explaining the decision to sell. This wasn't vengeance, it was clarity. And if your family calls you their ATM, maybe it's time to check your balance, not theirs. I posted it anonymously, no photo. The next morning, hundreds of likes, women messaging I did the same. You gave me words to tell my sister no. It wasn't applause, it was alignment. Holding those messages, I realised being seen outside my family felt more validating than being erased inside it ever was. I folded the notes from Kayla and Dad into my notebook, then tore the page off and tossed it in the cafe's tip jar, name scratched out, but the words clean. To someone ready to choose themselves. I stepped out into fresh wind, no rain on my face, no folder in my hand. Freedom wasn't fireworks. It was a quiet closing. Some ties severed, others left unlit. And me, finally, free to follow my own thread. I spent a few days just breathing, walking without purpose, sitting in parks with a cup of bad coffee. The silence was new, not heavy, just vast. And then slowly, the idea came back. Something I had scribbled in an old notebook years ago. Break the ATM cycle. The podcast began in my bedroom closet, surrounded by hoodies and winter coats to soften the echo. I used a mic Corey recommended and watched 3 YouTube tutorials on audio mixing. My first episode was raw, just me telling the story of what it means to be the responsible one, the fixer, the bank. My voice cracked once, but I didn't edit it out. It felt honest. I hit publish and closed the laptop. Within days, the downloads trickled in. 10, 30, 100. Then an email Angela, I thought I was crazy for feeling resentful. You put it into words. Thank you. Another said, I've never heard someone talk about financial abuse in families like that. I brought Corey on for episode 3. He explained legal protections, how to navigate family business deals without losing yourself. We laughed about the boutique contract, how it went from a hidden lifeline to a courtroom grenade. The episode blew up. People wanted more. Kayla messaged a week later, if you ever want me on, I'm in. I invited her for episode 6. We recorded it in her kitchen, coffee brewing in the background. She talked about silence, about watching things happen and not knowing when to speak. I told her she was the first one who did. We didn't script it. We just remembered out loud. The party, the folder, the silence, and the moment she broke it. That episode got the most messages. People said I saw myself in Kayla, or I wish I had someone like that. I started hearing from women across the country, mothers, daughters, sisters, who had carried financial weight alone. Some had walked away, some hadn't yet. But every single one wanted to be seen. I got invited onto a panel for a bigger podcast. I remember standing outside the studio holding my notes, wondering if I'd mess it up. But once I sat down behind the mic, I felt still, not confident exactly, just clear. I told my story. The studio went quiet. And then the host said, This is what people need to hear. A few months later, I hosted a meetup at the local library. Nothing fancy, just a circle of chairs and a table with store-bought cookies. 11 women came. Some wore work uniforms. Some held notebooks. We didn't all share, but we all listened. I remember one woman, mid-40s nurse, scrubs tired eyes, who said, My brother lives rent-free in our family home. I pay the mortgage. They call him the dreamer. She didn't cry. None of us did. But I saw her jaw loosen. Like breathing got easier. Sometimes I'd be walking through Trader Joe's and someone would stop me. Are you the ATM podcast woman? I'd nod. They'd say thank you or just smile. It wasn't fame. It was something quieter. Like being useful in a different way. The podcast grew. Sponsors came. I said no to most. I didn't want to sell skincare. I wanted to build something real. I partnered with a legal aid nonprofit offering free consults to women in family-owned businesses. Corey ran a few of them pro bono. I still worked my day job, but I slept better, ate better, laughed more. There were still hard days, triggers, times I wondered if I had gone too far. But then another email would arrive. Because of your show, I told my sister no, or I finally moved out. I wasn't healed, but I was healing, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't alone while doing it. Angela stepped out into the fresh wind, no rain on her face, no folder in her hand. Freedom wasn't fireworks. It was a quiet closing. Some ties severed, others left unlit. And nonetheless, me finally free to follow my own thread. There were still hard days. A trigger here, an overheard comment there. Time when I wondered if I'd gone too far. Then an email would arrive. Because of your show, I told my sister no. Or I finally moved out. I wasn't healed, but I was healing. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't alone while doing it. That evening, I found a stationery pad on my desk with the heading to my younger self. I stared at the blank lines for a full 5 minutes before I began writing to my 14-year-old self, the one who scrubbed diner tables on weekends, whose fingers were raw with cleaning rags, and whose heart ached from watching her sister lace up fresh Nikes she couldn't afford. My words came slowly, deliberately. I described the nights I cried under a single light bulb, telling myself it would get better. I wrote about the time my school counsellor complimented me on my maturity and how I swallowed it to feel special, even though it cut sharper than any praise should. I mentioned how I skipped lunch to save $5 that went to Leslie's tuition. I closed my eyes as I wrote, "You don't have to earn love by disappearing. You deserve space to breathe. You deserve to exist not as the family fixer, but as Angela." I finished the letter with shaky handwriting and bold words I never believed, but now carried, "You deserve to be seen." Folding it, sealing it, and slipping it into a box labelled "Keep," I didn't intend to read it again. It was a promise. Ink turned to boundary. The next morning, my hand hesitated over a high school-age scrapbook I was sorting. I found a leather-bound notebook with Leslie's name scribbled on the cover. I nearly tossed it aside, rejected old memories, but something stopped me. I opened it, right where the zipper weakened, and read 2008. I hate how Angela's calm makes Mum smile. I hate that I feel broke even when she offers me cash. And then 2011, I watched her study for NYU. I watched Dad brag about her grades. I sank into debt because I refused to take her loan. It felt like submission. I read more raw, honest entries nights when Leslie sat in her dorm bathroom texting me secrets she never voiced aloud. Confessions about her anxiety attacks over unpaid invoices in her boutique, about the time she woke up crying because she felt trapped in my shadow. At one point she wrote, "It scares me that she never looks at me, not really." These writings cut deeper than any confrontation. I realised something I hadn't admitted: we were both invisible, just in different ways. She was jealous of the spotlight I never asked to be in. I was resentful of a gratitude I never received. Pain mirrored pain. I closed the notebook and carried it outside the afternoon sun, turning water into gold. I didn't burn it. I didn't frame it. I just folded it back into the box. We were both unloved. I whispered into the breeze like a confession, but said only for me. My phone buzzed with a headline. "Leslie's anxiety treatment has been confirmed by family friends." Then a message from Mum popped up. "Leslie is in anxiety treatment. If you can call her." My steps stopped. The street narrowed. Colours seemed to fade. I pressed the notification again, thumb hovering, but I didn't respond. Because forgiveness wasn't a duty. It was a quiet choice. I put the phone away. I walked toward the sunset, the sky painted with ribbons of light, a finish line without fans. Each step felt steady, not shaky. I thought of forgiveness not as reconnection, but as reclamation. I imagined Leslie reading those diary pages again, finally understanding the weight she carried and the weight she inflicted. I imagined my younger self finally believing love wasn't transactional. My mind drifted back to the letter to my younger self. I reached into my bag, pulled it out, unfolded it. I read the lines again, tears unbidden but silent. I wrote beneath the original words, "You were enough then. You are enough now." That evening, I tucked myself into bed earlier than usual. I placed Leslie's notebook and the letter together, in a drawer, not locked, but private. I wanted them close enough to remember, far enough to not hurt. Before sleep took me, I whispered internal narration that felt like closure. Forgiveness isn't a gift you give others. Sometimes it's something you save for yourself when you finally found peace. It was short. It was quiet. It was enough. And maybe that's what so many of us are still learning, how to choose peace over performance. To know that being the strong one doesn't mean carrying everyone else's weight until you disappear. In a world where we're praised for sacrifice and silence, there's quiet bravery in simply saying, "I matter too." I know someone listening right now is tired. Tired of giving, of explaining, of being the emotional first responder in their family. Maybe you've been called selfish for setting boundaries, or made to feel like your love only counts when it's convenient for others. Let me tell you, your worth isn't measured by what you endure. We're seeing a shift. More people are going to therapy. They're journaling, moving out, blocking numbers, starting fresh. Not to be cruel, but to be well. They're breaking the invisible contracts handed down through guilt and obligation. They're learning that healing isn't about revenge, it's about freedom. And if this story felt like a mirror, even in the smallest way, if it made you feel a little less alone, a little more seen, then take this as your sign to pause, breathe, and choose yourself. We'll keep telling these stories. We'll keep breaking the cycle, one truth at a time. If you found value in this journey, I invite you to follow this channel, share it with someone carrying quiet burdens, and leave your story in the comments. You never know who needs to hear it. Until next time, take gentle care of yourself. You are not alone anymore.